We have some breaking news in the Pennsylvania clergy sex abuse investigations. This is gigantic and should send chills down the spine of all Catholics and should put the bishops and the hierarchy in the United States and in Rome on notice. Breaking news from the AP. Feds open clergy abuse probe in Pennsylvania. The U.S. Justice Department has opened an investigation of child sexual abuse inside the Roman Catholic Church in Pennsylvania, using subpoenas to demand confidential files and testimony from church leaders, according to two people familiar with the probe. I always hate anonymous sources, but let's continue. The subpoenas served last week follow a scathing state grand jury report over the summer that found that 301 predator priests, in scare quotes, in Pennsylvania had molested more than 1,000 children over 7 decades, and that church leaders had covered up for the offenders. Now, federal prosecutors are bringing to the Justice Department's considerable resources to bear, according to two people who were not authorized to discuss the investigation publicly and spoke to the Associated Press on condition of anonymity. It's groundbreaking if we're going to see one of the U.S. attorneys pursuing the Catholic cases, said Marcy Hamilton, a University of Pennsylvania professor and chief executive of Child USA, a nonprofit think tank focused on preventing child abuse. The federal government has so far been utterly silent on the Catholic cases. 4 of the state's 8 Roman Catholic dioceses, Philadelphia, Erie, Allentown, and Harrisburg, acknowledged receiving subpoenas and said they would cooperate or working with the Justice Department officials. Other dioceses did not immediately respond to calls for comment. There was no indication the Justice Department is planning a more ambitious and expensive investigation of clergy abuses nationwide. U.S. Attorney William McSwain of Philadelphia, who issued the Pennsylvania subpoenas, wants to know if priests, bishops, seminarians, or others committed any federal crimes. He demanded the bishops turn over any evidence that anyone in their ranks took children across state lines for illicit purposes, sent sexual images or messages via phone or computer, instructed anyone not to contact police, reassigned suspected predators, or use money or other assets as part of the scandal. And that's why this is gigantic. The grand jury subpoenas also seek documents stored in secret archives, historical archives, or confidential files, and records related to the diocese's organizational charts, finances, insurance coverage, clergy assignments, and treatment of priests, according to the people who spoke to the AP. These are the files where you are going to end up seeing the ties to the Papal Foundation with Cardinal McCarrick and Cardinal Wuerl, as well as, if anywhere, the cover-up of seminarian abuse at the hands of bishops and priests would be exposed. Continuing. A representative for McSwain declined to comment, as did a Justice Department spokesman. It's a courageous move whenever prosecutors take on something that there's no precedent for, that is uncertain. You're investigating resources with potentially no return, but it needs to be done, said David Hickton, the former U.S. attorney in western Pennsylvania who considered accusing the Altoona-Johnson Diocese of criminal or civil racketeering in 2016, but left office before the investigation was completed. The diocese eventually settled with his successor, signing a consent decree promising to make reforms. Though child sex abuse cases are generally handled by local prosecutors, federal prosecutors can step in at any time. McSwain's predecessors have been aggressive in pursuing international sex tourism cases in recent years, once bringing teenage boys from the Eastern European nation of Moldova to Philadelphia to testify about American businessmen who preyed on them. The nearly 900-page Pennsylvania grand jury report found that church leaders had engaged in a systematic cover-up by shuffling accused priests around to different parishes and, in some cases, working to prevent police investigations. Because of the statute of limitations, however, only 2 priests were charged as a result of the investigation. Many other priests are dead. The report led to the resignation last week of Cardinal Donald Wuerl as Archbishop of Washington. He was accused of helping to protect some child-molesting priests when he was Bishop of Pittsburgh from 1988 to 2006. What's interesting about the timing of this is that just days ago, Pope Francis accepted the resignation of Cardinal Wuerl, but then gave him essentially a new job doing almost exactly the same thing as anything but cardinal in Washington, D.C. It's a non-resignation. Legal experts said that if the federal prosecutors can show that church leaders systematically covered up for child molesting priests in the past 5 years, dioceses could be charged under the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, or RICO, the federal law originally passed to bring down the mafia. If you're going to file a criminal RICO or civil RICO, the decision is how much of the leadership do you have to capture, Hickton asked Thursday. The bishops themselves are captains of ships, but the admiral is the Pope. Think about this for a second. A lot of people have been wanting a RICO investigation. Be careful what you wish for. 2 Eastern Catholic dioceses in Pennsylvania also appear to be subjects of the federal grand jury investigation. A leader of the Ukrainian Catholic Archieparchy of Philadelphia wrote to parishioners last week saying he was cooperating with the subpoena and would turn over documents promptly. A lawyer for the Byzantine Archieparchy of Pittsburgh told the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette this week that it too is involved in the preliminary stages of an investigation. The lawyer declined to elaborate to the AP. The grand jury report, issued by the Pennsylvania Attorney General Josh Shapiro, led to a showdown in the state legislature this week when he pushed to give child abuse victims a 2-year window to sue the church in cases otherwise too old to pursue. They are changing the laws to go after this. Keep this in mind. Church leaders oppose the change. Well, of course they did, warning it would cripple their ability to fund Catholic charities and enrich lawyers, or maybe because they are afraid of going to jail. Lawmakers ended the session Wednesday without taking action. That won't stand for very long. Shapiro declined to comment Thursday on the federal investigation. In 2011, the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office brought a landmark cover-up case against Monsignor William Lynn, a longtime aide to 2 Philadelphia cardinals. The case illustrated how difficult it can be to make such charges stick. Lynn became the first U.S. church official ever prosecuted for the alleged cover-up of child molestation by priests when he was arrested on child endangerment charges. At trial, he said he had merely followed orders from above. A jury convicted him in 2012. He spent 3 years in and out of prison as his conviction was twice overturned by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court. He is awaiting a 3rd trial. So, some thoughts. First, this is the Vatican's worst nightmare. This comes days after Cardinal Wuerl's resignation was accepted by the Pope, only to be given a new but exactly the same position in D.C. without the title of Cardinal. Wuerl will certainly be implicated in this, as any orders from above came from his office. But what's even more interesting is that the documents will likely reveal any wrongdoing tied to the Papal Foundation, that personal pet project of Uncle Teddy McCarrick's that enabled him to stay close to each pope from John Paul II to Francis by raising millions of dollars for their personal ministries. In these cases, it's always important to follow the money. Finally, if there is documentation of seminarians being abused by McCarrick in these files, they will come to light. The investigation may be about the heinous cover-up of child abuse, and I am definitely not downplaying the importance of that. But in RICO investigations, all is fair game. Finally, something else to consider. In a RICO investigation, the private property of offending organizations is often confiscated. Are we, as Catholics, prepared to see parishes, cathedrals, convents, and the like confiscated by the state if the absolutely worst case turns out to be true? Think and pray on that. If you like videos like this, like and share this video and subscribe, and click on that notification bell below. I can be found on Twitter and Facebook with links in the description. For Return to Tradition, I'm Anthony Stein. Ave Maria.